Thanks so much for coming on the mic, Chris.
Dude, you're in my city. This is easy. Absolutely.
Oh, we are. Dude, I appreciate you taking the time. We're here obviously recording season 1 and you're on it.
Yep, we got Chris Howe in the house.
Hey, come on. Bro, what was your nickname growing up?
Oh, they explored all sorts of stuff like Chris Cow. That's it. That's actually the only one.
It's actually kind of dope.
Yeah, Chris Callis sounds like a movie actor name or something.
But as a child, you internalize it and then it impacts you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So off the mic, obviously, we were chatting about where we want to take the direction of this episode in particular. Is there a specific point we should start at, Paul?
Man, I think we should talk about right now just how you're feeling, what's going on right now in your life. And it can be brief. I just think there's a lot of listeners that follow you on YouTube, they follow you on social media, and they get to see, the polished video cuts, right?
No, for sure. I mean, you guys are actually catching me at like the perfect time. I would say the last 6 weeks, I've been the most dialed in, aware, and connected to what I'm doing. I think for a really long time, I was like making, and then there was a really the last 2 years have just been like a pretty wild experience internally where I felt pretty disconnected from my work and who I was and why I do everything. And that's really just by coming to the realization of certain things about what motivated me in the past. And when I realized that those weren't the healthiest thing, I had to really reframe that. And no joke, it hit me what felt like putting in all the effort. And then on a Tuesday night in early September, it was just oh, this is it. I figured it out. Mm-hmm. And since that moment, every day has just been smooth sailing. The right things are coming in my life. I'm feeling energized. And I think we're really setting up for, without setting any expectations, really an epic, for me at least, 2025.
That's awesome. Just even you saying those things on a mic, I'm sure people can feel
the tone,
that energy and the tone.
Yeah.
So my goal right now in the next 5, maybe 10 minutes is to kind of capture some of that into a bottle.
Yeah.
And someone can maybe, if they're feeling down, feeling a little lost, maybe their business is not growing the way they want it to, how are you able to get yourself out of that position that you were maybe previously in? Maybe on a practical day, the day-to-day, or maybe it's a mindset tip that really just absolutely shifted everything for you.
I mean, I think you have to start to be really comfortable with experimentation. Nothing will always be the same result all the time. So even if I had 4 years where I was this is amazing, I'm feeling really good, internally you could be going through something where it just doesn't click in the same way that it used to. And you keep kind of doing it. And so as long as you start to get enough data from going back to that and you're I'm not enjoying this like I used to, it's time for you to adapt and shift. And so for me, what that looks like is starts with just a lot of inner work and reflecting on being okay, pay attention to the things that are lighting you up. And then what is the thread through on all of that I can kind of tap into all the time. And also, once you start to hit goals and you thought that those goals were going to make you happy, or you thought that goal was the reason you wake up every day, and then you do that goal, and then you're wait a second, turns out that's not the thing that motivates me anymore. So it really starts with there's a lot of inner work to do. And then once you get through that, there's a lot of experimentation, and then coming back to being what is just fun in all of this, as long as you can start to go, this is my basic needs that need to be covered, financially, mentally. Now I can get back to your craft. And for me, I just wanted to make sure I just didn't hate picking up a camera.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
When I picked up a camera when I was a kid, it was the greatest feeling in the world. And it's well, how do you get back to that? How do you get, I always said I was filming a video this week and I'm trying to remember what year 1 on YouTube felt like.
Mm-hmm.
Why does year 6 not feel as fun? How do we get back to year 1?
That's good. I like how you kind of painted this picture of sometimes you got to pull yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And it almost made me realize there's a relationship with even professional sports. There's a reason why there's an off season.
Yeah.
Bro, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, you might get to a point where you're yo, I need something a little different to bring that excitement back. So it's cool to hear that you're in a season where you have clarity. Would you say it's almost like a reset, or do you feel like it's just going through maybe self-discovery and internal work where now you're what I was doing, I'm going to continue to do, but I got new ideas?
Yeah. The funny thing is that you can have this understanding of like, let's call it like a platitude. You're like, oh, I'm showing up every day for this reason, but you don't feel connected to it, but you know it to be true. So you just keep doing it. And nothing has really changed that much, but now I understand it.
Wow.
And the difference of like hearing it and not understanding it and trying to do it and then it not connecting. But now I'm like, oh, that's why I wake up every day. Because I could have told myself, oh yeah, every day I wake up, try to teach people on YouTube. That's a good reason because it impacts their lives and it improves the world. You have like positive ripples outside of that. But then now I'm like, oh no, like I can connect with that even outside of work. I can do this even if YouTube went away.
That's so good.
I think you brought up sports a second ago.
I did.
And I think that's a really cool kind of angle to think about the creative work, because there is a lot of parallels to athletes and I would say artists and how they want to show up to the world. And I think with sports especially, there's typically, if you're like a star, there's like a run. Like you go through like this season or multiple seasons where you just can't miss. Like
Jeremy
for some
Lin.
reason,
Yep.
like you're just, it's just like you have superpowers
Yeah,
all
you
of a
feel
sudden.
invincible.
Like you literally feel like you can't miss. For athletes, like all the articles about you and they're just like, where did this come from? But then there's always like the fall off where everyone's like, oh,
And all eyes are on you.
yeah. And so I guess my question to yourself is, in the YouTube journey, I'm sure you've had a lot of ups, a lot of downs, even in your own freelance business, trying to run your own business. How do you typically get out of those down moments, right? Like obviously you know what it's like to be on the up moment. When you hit the down, how do you get yourself out of it? Or have you worked through that at all when you talk about
Yeah,
inner work?
absolutely. Like I have a pretty good like specific story of a down moment that helped me get to a place where I could just feel better about going at it consistently. So a couple years ago, I remember I was just having a great run where I felt like I couldn't miss, with just like, let's call the standard was like every time I put out a YouTube video, I kind of knew that it would get anywhere from like 25,000 to 50,000 views. And then I put out a video and it got like 4,000 views. And I felt like I started having like a panic attack. And then what is always interesting, what I think is a great tip for moments like this, if you are experiencing a down moment, the down moment is just an indicator of like, okay, this is an area that needs attention in your life. Because if you don't put in the effort to get out of that in the future, the world's just going to constantly test you with it. So I've been on this high, you're now in this down moment. So step one, which I have clarity on after going through it, is like, just recognize that that's a chance to just be like, there's something that needs to be worked on probably within yourself there. And then from that moment, specifically what happened is I realized I was like, oh, I attach my self-worth to views. Okay, that's not healthy. So let's figure that out. So now if I make a video, the only metric that I measure now is not from how well the video did. I measure it from like, what did I grow? Was I able to learn something? Did I teach something within this? Was I proud of this? And that's like a great mindset shift, because you can always change your perspective to have a healthier way of looking at anything, and not in a way that like you're disassociated with it. You're like, if something bad happens and then you're like, well, no, I can just look at it in a good way. You can acknowledge that at that moment sucked, but there's always a way, and especially in your work and your process, to just feel optimistic about it and also reshift it in a way that's like, this doesn't have to show up all the time for myself.
That's a fire mindset shift, because I'll be honest, I've been in a season where I'm posting on Instagram Reels consistently, and I post maybe at the wrong time and it flops, and I'm like, bruh, I'm going to archive this joker right now.
Yeah.
Let me hit that archive.
But man, for you to be in a spot where you now look at it like, oh, I learned from this, I grew from it. And guess what? The more I continue to like put reps in, I'm going to find that there's muscle growth in my business. But also it shows that there's more maturity. We're talking about like, how do you get out of the lows? And how do you also, when you're at the highs, when you're making a bunch of money, leads are coming in, maybe integrations are coming through your inbox and it's just like easy. How do you prepare for those lows? And I think you nailed it right on the head. And I think a lot of people that are listeners right now, whether they're freelance photographers or videographers in year 1 or 10, man, we need that reminder sometimes.
I also think that the lows, I was actually just saying this to my girlfriend today, the lows give you perspective of how great the highs are.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the lows, you don't even realize that the high was even a high in the first place. And so like if you're always getting the highs, like the human nature is that will just become your new baseline. And so then all of a sudden it'll be like, well, let's say you finally go from like a Volkswagen to a BMW, but then you're driving the BMW every day and you're like, but I drove the Porsche and like, I want that. And then you'll go back. But then rather than being like, but if I drive the Volkswagen, maybe that gives me perspective of how great the BMW is. I didn't need the Porsche in the first place. That is a fun analogy for the car enthusiast.
That's really good. I like that.
It totally makes sense.
Ed's a car guy, so Ed just
I mean,
got pumped.
I love cars, so it's like I'm definitely on the I need the Porsche vibe.
Like,
bro, I'm a Kia boy. Kia boys.
Yo, Kia's crushing it right now.
They are. They have a lot of good cars right now. I want to kind of talk about your business a little bit.
Yeah.
I think obviously there's like the whole YouTube side, but for those listening, you also have run like a very successful production business as well over the years. You've worked with huge companies, doing commercials, doing social work. There's just so much to unpack there on the business side, like front, not even like online facing. How did you get into that? And you obviously didn't go to film school, I don't think.
I went to, at the time it was called like Ryerson University, but now it's called TMU. I studied radio and television arts. And so it was like more broadcasting focused versus like artistic filmmaking. But the two schools kind of like overlapped with each other.
Yeah. So like when you were setting goals in the early stages of holding a camera, like obviously we all know if you're listening to this, one of your goals is probably to make more money. Like it's just obvious. Like everyone's trying to be more happy, make more money doing what they love. So when you hit that phase of like, okay, shoot, I can actually make some money with my camera. How did you start putting the puzzle pieces in place to eventually get to a point where you were landing like a commercial gig?
Yeah, I mean, everything is always building up your confidence from the first thing. Like the first thing I ever got paid for was like shooting my friend on a horse, and she gave me like a gift card.
Hey.
And so, right, and you're like, oh, $50 to like
Applebee's. Do they have Applebee's in Canada?
Chili's.
We have our own version of it. It's called Kelsey's. And it's a pretty okay restaurant. So, you know, I think everything is like leveraging that. So, you know, if you recognize, okay, if I can get $50 for this, I probably can get it again or more.
Wow.
And so you start to leverage your way up. And for me, what that looked like is that I used to be like a lifeguard. I'll try to tell this story as like quickly as possible. But basically I used to be a lifeguard. My boss realized that I like was good at a camera. So she's like, film the next staff training. I made that, presented it to like the town of Newmarket where I worked, which is like just a little north of here. The mayor was like, this is a great video. Do you want to just make videos and get paid the same as a lifeguard? And I was like, sounds amazing. And then I started making videos in the government space. And then all of a sudden, because no one was making good videos in government, and also like if you get a video that gets like 5,000 views, they're like, it went viral. I'm like, do you realize this video went viral? And so very quickly, I just found a niche that had very little expertise in. And I was able to just fly very quickly. And so all of a sudden I became like the government video guy for a long time. And I built a business truly just off of the backbone of an industry that had poor quality videos. And I just came in with like medium quality videos at the time.
Market opportunity right there.
And so what I think, which is a great like perspective, is that I always say that it's really easy to see what everyone else is doing and being like, oh, I want to shoot music videos for like Drake. Like if you live in Toronto, you're like, that's the goal. I want to shoot music videos and maybe one day I'll shoot for Drake. And that like that spot's only available for like 2 or 3 people, right? So you're competing against everybody. But why don't you just pay attention to an industry where there's like not a lot of good quality marketing or content going out, and then just find a way to make a slightly better product, and you will literally like fly there. Like maybe that industry is vacuums, and you're like, you know what? No one's making good vacuum videos. I can be the vacuum video guy for a while if you want. Like there's obviously like creative goals that we have as artists, but if you want to make money, just recognize that there's so many micro niches that exist in the world, and that as long as you recognize that you could do something better in that space, you could, and especially if it's like a world that has tons of money, you can make so much.
That's good.
Right? And in my case, I was like, well, these government videos are going to be there forever, because guess what? Governments in Canada don't go under. They're always there. And so more or less, you
repeat clients, man.
Yeah, you know the town of Newmarket's going to be there until I'm 100.
Yeah. So during that season, how passionate were you to actually shoot those videos?
I mean, for me, it was that I was like 18 years old.
Totally. So in that season, it made sense.
It made sense in my life then. Like I felt like they were giving me creative control. I was learning a lot. And the videos I was making was getting like, praise, validation. They were successful within the like bubble that it existed in, right? And so it was easy to have a lot of pride in my work. And I liked it because it meant that was my opportunity to work for myself.
Wow.
And so if my goal at the time was like, I just want to build a company and I just want to make money and I want to work for myself and I'd like to travel, well, I hit all those goals.
Bro, what was after the government videos? What was the next category of clients?
It was all travel related.
Okay.
For me, it was like I came from a background where I like used to play music and things like that.
Yep.
And so I was always like, oh, maybe music, it will be the chance for me to travel the world. When you start to talk to musicians, they realize that you just play shows in places that are not that good and you are going in, playing your show, doing sound check, eating some food and then heading out. So you rarely see things. So I was like, well, maybe that's not it. But maybe the person who has the camera gets put into all the sickest spots because they want to showcase, they need to capture it.
Yep.
And so maybe that's the vehicle, which also hits the same kind of like inner goal that I wanted, which was just to travel and be an artist at the same time. And so for me, it was really just building the portfolio of the travel related stuff. And so filmed some family trips. I turned that into leveraging it to the next step, which was then filming my own city. I sent that to like Huffington Post at the time because that was like HuffPo was the thing.
Yeah.
They shared it. It got 1 million views. The prime minister shared it. Like there was like so much. And then from there, I finally got my first like press trip to the Azores.
Cool.
And then that was that moment, like similar to like, oh, I got the $50 gift card. I remember sitting on like the edge of this like abandoned hotel overlooking one of the best views of my life, like literally the best views of my life, being like, this happened and I have enough data to prove that like this will happen again. And it's only going to grow from here. And so really like you have to invest in yourself because I could have kept doing the government thing and like but probably been like kind of not satisfied internally or realized that I was like, the next step is that I want to do this. And so really what I hope we take away in just in a clear way is like, you won't be able to get to do the thing that you want to do unless you invest back into yourself to do it. So if you want to do travel content, pay to go on trips and film the whole experience.
Yep.
And then find a way to package that so that a brand or a tourism board or a company that's in the travel space would even be interested in hiring you.
It's so true. I think, one, that was fire. I think that's good because it gives the actionable steps for anyone listening. Like he went from getting gift cards, doing like a lifeguard training video to traveling and making money.
But the common theme was you maximize the opportunity.
Yeah. And
you
then,
could have been like, I'll stay in my lane and be the lifeguard. But you couldn't put the camera down. Then also going over to the travel side, there was proof of concept before you double down on it. You're like, I love traveling. I'm getting recognition for the videos that I'm putting out from family trips. There's a market opportunity here. What year do you feel like there was that moment where you're like, I can kind of rinse and repeat this over and over again in the travel space?
Yeah, that was probably like 7 years ago. We started
Which was the best time for that.
I mean, that was like the hype of like the short film travel videos.
Yeah.
I mean, they still got it like their moments now, but at that time,
it was peak.
No one was making like travel content and having it be seen on like socials in the same way. And some of because I also think it's really important to understand how companies work. And when you're looking at a tourism board, if they're going to even just try to give you money to come and travel somewhere, they've been hiring like people from newspapers and TV shows their entire life. So they're kind of taking a risk on you. But if there's like a new up and coming like social media person, they're taking a risk on you to maybe get their career moving forward. So like, I always think like a really great perspective is to understand how the person that's hiring you, how do you help them also achieve their goals within their own like inner system that they're a part of? And like, for example, like if I was on set yesterday and I was receiving like pushback from the client, and I just have to realize that when I'm experiencing the pushback, she's not getting mad at me for what I'm doing. She's literally going like, my boss, if I don't protect this, will come at me for not being the goalie here. And she's just protecting her job. So if you help protect her job so that she doesn't lose it and you all work, then she'll keep hiring you because you know that she's like, oh, he's on my team.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yo, you're dropping bars right now. Because I love that because me and Ev have always talked about the goal is to make the decision maker look good to their boss.
Yes.
And I think you just nailed it right on the head that you can't be married to the creative.
Yeah.
Because like if you're working for a brand and they know more about the brand than you do.
Absolutely.
And they're in more meetings around the brand and the target consumer than you are. So when they're giving feedback, it's honestly because they're hearing it from the higher ups.
Yeah.
So that's money, man.
And really, like, they're just scared of losing their job.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just be like, oh, fear is such a motivator on so many levels for so many people. Because as artists, we always want to be like, you're ruining the creative. And like the ego's like, save the creative as much as possible. But also if you just take a moment to recognize that maybe they're just scared about losing their job. So why don't you just work with them and find like a happy medium?
Yeah.
And we were talking about this off camera, but I was always saying, like, if you can understand the communication and you can really nail like your communication within your own interpersonal dynamics, whether it's like a romantic relationship or like your friends, business is easy.
Just want to shift the conversation a little bit in a slightly different direction. I think freelance creatives are typically always on the hunt to try to get the biggest gig, the largest household name brand on their portfolio. But now that you've kind of done both ends of that, now you have hindsight, what are your thoughts on, you know, big budget, big crew versus like a freelancer who does it all, like a jack of all trades?
Yeah. So my perspective is shifted a lot more towards the creator these days. I think the great opportunity is that if you are somebody who's like on YouTube and you've just had to wear all the hats at any capacity in your career, I really think that this is where things are going. And that's only like, again, I want to reiterate that this is just my perspective and what I'm noticing. But, you know, I had the privilege of working on a shoot recently with our company where we like oversaw everything, and I had like a 17-person crew. And at the end of that project, I was like, never again. And it's funny when you hire everybody to just be a professional in their space, or like the director just does the director thing, the producer just does the producer thing. Yeah, and everyone's like, okay, this there's like an ecosystem here that works. But I just felt like there was too many cooks in the kitchen, and like it overcooked the creative, and then the final product was just like garbage. and I was like, I can't believe we just blew like $100,000 on this. Like, this is it. Like, I've literally made things for like $1,000 with like two people that have more creative spirit and energy and perspective that did even performed better. And for me, it's nothing against that. Like, I'm very grateful for the crew. I'm very grateful for those experiences. But what that taught me and what I noticed is that brands don't even want to have that much overhead, because they're looking through all the line items being like, why did we pay for this? And coming back to the whole thing about how everyone just wants to keep their job, everyone goes, there's this like, we'll get into this in a quick
Everyone's
second,
competing.
but everyone has to be like proving their value on set. And so if you have 17 people proving their value on set, everyone's just adding a little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper, a little bit more, rather than being like, what is good for the stew we're making right now? And maybe the best thing for the stew is that you're not even here.
Chris is going ratatouille on it.
Right?
Yeah, for real.
Or that you just say, actually, I don't add it. And then that's tough, because then if you decide like someone being there, and then they decide actually me being there probably doesn't add value. So what I've been like kind of working on in the last little while, and just paying attention to like what brands want through the conversations amongst peers, as well as where I'm noticing the industry, both on the financial side as well as like the distribution and YouTube side, is that brands would rather shift part of their budget rather than hiring more talent or bodies on set to be like, why don't we just send you to like an amazing location and put you in the places that highlight our product the best? And so I would rather have, you know, what I'm trying to build the ethos around right now is that like budgets are getting smaller, and so are we. And so my whole idea is that like the company I'm building, the boutique agency that we're putting together on the side of just video production, like we only make great videos and take incredible photos. So I don't want to be involved in the marketing side. That can be for someone else. But where we come in is like, we'll storytell next level. But those crew, the people that are on it, it's going to be like a 4 to 5 person team max. You're going to have someone who's like producer, director, like project manager, and then you're going to have like DOP editor, and then maybe you'll have like talent or somebody else or an AD, just to make sure things like run smoothly and you're hitting all like the goals. And I would rather have like a very nimble 4-person team that's going to have their eyes on everything, rather than having a 17-person team, which feels good in theory, but really you're just blowing the budget out. And so for me, that's like, brands are happier, the final product is better. And I think it's great that, I think there's just so much information going out there that people are like, don't be a jack of all trades, just like be the best DOP in the world. Yes, you will still find opportunities, but I guarantee in today's age, at least through what I'm seeing, is you will get more opportunities if you at least do 2 to 3 of those jobs to make yourself just like the Swiss Army knife that's like unstoppable. That person gets hired. That's the person I'm hiring now.
Wow. I think you said something that a lot of people need to focus on if you're trying to work with brands directly as a creative right now, is you need to expand your skill sets. And it might take time. Like Chris might be on chapter 10, you might be on chapter 2 of your business story. But I will kind of like agree with what you're saying, where like brands that I've worked with, they're looking for someone who's kind of the one-stop shop, that's confident and can maximize budget. Because man, nothing's worse than being on a set that's too big, like you said, where you can walk away and be like, bro, I'm pretty sure we could have maximized the budget a little bit more and reallocated it.
Yeah.
We don't need all these people.
But I think also, I completely agree with this statement and everything that's being said. But I do think a part of it is because brands just want to see their money working.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like let's say there's like a huge budget and they want to keep their job and the decision maker. I feel also that they need to see, like they need to show their boss that the money is being used. Like if they spend a huge budget and like someone shows up on like their DJI Ronin and like one small Sony camera and they're used to seeing like diffusion and like huge kits and huge sets, I feel like, I don't know, maybe get your take on this, like as you're building out this new chapter. Like what if the brand's like, well, we're used to seeing like way bigger productions here. Like can we reduce the budget heavily then to like account for this like smaller crew? Because then you run into like the pricing.
I think it's also
battle.
the psychology of a crew where it's like a cinematographer rocking a gimbal versus an easy rig,
or like coming with a map box.
Some decision makers aren't creative.
Yeah, for sure.
But they really care about the logistics behind the brand.
That is now your responsibility to educate the client on that. So rather than not having that conversation ahead of time where you're going to be like, when you come up on set, you're going to see small cameras. You're going to see these things. But really, the thing that you've hired is the person who has the vision, the person who understands strategy, and the person who understands that like, I'm getting the exact shot with the least amount of equipment possible because that's effective. Rather than being like, I'm not here to do the dance with you to prove my value. I'm here to say I'm on your team to keep your budget smaller. But by that, you will see less things on set, but you're getting a better product. Because I'm not here to appease you or placate to you in order for you to prove your value. And that's really just like, and I think where you can really put the reps in with something like that is if you're like a wedding videographer, the person who is hiring you, you have to educate them on why they're paying so much money, right? Every single time. Because the difference is if you go to an agency will have some idea of being like, I've gone through this experience before. I understand that like a red camera costs this much to rent. And I also understand that like diffusion costs this much. But if you're doing that with a wedding videographer or someone who's a
like
bride
a couple,
or a couple, they don't know.
They're like, why does it cost $8,000 to get a 2-minute highlight
Or they want
film?
the zoom lens because it looks cool.
Yeah.
You have the
And
Fuji, they're like,
so
hold
what
up.
you realize is like in that entire conversation, all you're doing is educating somebody on the way that you work, right? I don't know. I used to subscribe to the mentality of, have warm bodies on set, make sure we're playing this whole entire game. I'm just not down for that anymore.
That's good.
And I think through that filter, I'm going to find the right clients and I'm also going to find the right people to work with. And I think rather than trying to be the restaurant that serves every single piece of food on the planet, I'm just going to dilute that experience for everyone, including myself, rather than being like, we only do this. And if you don't want to participate as a client, then cool. I know I'm going to find somebody who's down for this. And that just means I'm going to be working with the clients that get that. And so ultimately what I want you to take away from that is that obviously I recognize I have a privilege to be able to say like, I hope by presenting this ethos, I'll find the right people. And you might be in a position listening to this being like, I just want gigs. I just want to get hired more often. So how do I make myself more available to that? But the reality is, at least through my experience right now, is that we've been sold the like dance and the show for so long. And that's how the industry has been. And I want to come in, not to stronghold and change it, but to just have an opportunity to be like, we don't need to do it this way anymore. Because there's literally people out there who's are creators with a FX3 or an S5 Mark II with a gimbal making the greatest stuff on the planet. And so many more brands are going like, okay, we'll hire the big crew. Let's allocate like 10 grand and throw it to this kid. And then that kid, whoever, let's call it the professional who's just more isolated in a smaller team, funny enough, that product is often better.
Oh yeah, that happens. I've seen it happen. I've been in projects where that has happened. Like, it's actually wild.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think for me, like, I don't mind always having a lens that we're looking through to make sure that we're hitting all the markers of the client and making sure they feel good. Like, yeah, like, we'll set up the client monitor. We can set up a live feed, comment on making sure your product feels good on this. That's a process, but that process doesn't have to be expensive anymore. Like, we live in a day and age where that technology is so accessible. You know, I can send a live feed from my camera on a Ronin halfway across the world for someone to dial in and then have a line of communication going back and forth. That doesn't need to be an entire company that you hire anymore. That's literally just like done on an iPhone app and an iPad, right? And so if you start to communicate this being like, I'm saving you money, but you still get the same experience, you're just not going to see the show as much, then why? I can still, or like Uber Eats them some Perrier if they want to feel like
facts, man.
Right? Experience.
Put them in Video
like,
Village and some Perrier.
Yeah. But I think part of that, and what I want someone to take away if they're listening, is just you have to educate your client on what their expectations are going to be for what they're going to see. Because if I show up with like an iPhone 16 on a Insta360 gimbal and it still looks good, what difference does it make if I shot that on a Red with a Ronin 2 and my back is broken and they're going like, okay.
Yeah. You're talking
See
about
how much money we spent, right?
what you're saying is good because you got to be able to educate. But in order to educate, you need to be a strong communicator. I think that's the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur. Straight up.
Yeah.
I've seen so many freelancers that are so dang creative, but they can't communicate to the decision maker. So the decision maker, the brand owns them.
Yeah.
And I do think that I've been able to see how someone who's creative and business minded is able to carry the conversation on that discovery call or in person or on set, where the decision maker's like, all right, I can be hands off because I trust you because, bro, you just steered the ship.
Yeah.
Can I just drop like what is just like such an honest like truth bomb?
Get them.
You don't need that next lens. You need to buy a course on how to communicate.
Wow.
That's where the money is.
Yeah.
That's like
huge.
Put the reps in there, because that's where you're leaving money on the table, is not being able to communicate your ideas and being able to communicate your value. The value doesn't come in having the 70 to 200. You can rent that. The value comes in being able to say, like, this is what I'm doing creatively and why I'm going to create an ROI for you.
Come on.
Dang.
I know
Mic
someone's
drop.
listening to this in the car right now, looking out the window like, oh, dang.
And then the gearhead's like, nah, I need that 70 to 200.
All the people that follow Ed on Instagram are like, yo, I need that C-stand with the light though.
I just think I come from that perspective. Like, I used to always think that the only reason I was getting hired is because I had the gear. And like, I had one of my bosses, like, when I used to work in the government space, being like, we're not hiring you because you have the camera or that you can make the video. We're hiring you because you know the vision for the video.
Wow.
And that is just your skill set. And so as a freelancer, yes, definitely be technically proficient, but also make sure that you understand like how to sell yourself.
Yeah.
Because all you'll do is you'll undermine yourself, and then you'll keep taking the jobs that are lower paid because you didn't realize that you didn't know how to tell the person that you were worth more.
Wow.
I just like something just clicked in my brain as we're having this conversation. And I think freelancers need to be good at figuring out what their sweet spot is. And that could mean like on all fronts. Like, what is a sweet spot for you in terms of like a budget for a client gig? Like, sweet spot as in what doesn't like make you want to pull your hairs out, but you're still making a good amount of money.
Yeah.
Because the sweet spot is not sometimes making more money, because then you're just stressed out.
I think it's also having
Yeah.
a sweet spot with making sure things align with the brand you're going to work with before you sign the contract.
Yeah.
Because I think that if you're finding yourself working with a bunch of clients that are receiving what you're saying and they're like, yo, I really value what you do, and like, we're not going to like need any more convincing, that's a sweet spot. But if you're working with a client that's very difficult before the project begins, yo, they're not, they don't align.
And the scariest part about all that, because for me, like, I was like a people pleaser and I had to like really work on that. Like, saying no is so difficult. To be like, no, I'm not doing the project. And then being okay that if they give it to someone else, and you have to like come to terms with being like, I said no because it was difficult and they didn't understand my value. All right. And if they are not aligned on like how you value yourself, then go and work for somebody that's going to do it, because they exist and you're just wasting your time on someone that doesn't appreciate you or value you to go and find the person that does.
Yeah. And I always feel like every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And if you're saying yes to a client that doesn't value you, you're saying no to a client that will value you if you just are a little more patient and have better conversations.
Yeah. And all it's doing is chipping away at your opportunity to do it for a long time. Because if you just have these negative and stressful experiences, you're just going to be like, well, I'm done with it. Maybe I'll just like shift to a different industry.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is it's really just came back from just being able to communicate or find the right people. Because like the life you want is just on the opposite side of like a lot of difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want will come by being able to do that, and then being at peace with if it doesn't come to terms.
Come on. That's so good. I think the kind of the topic that I want to hit on to bring this one home is we're always talking on MIDCONVO podcast about price development, budget, how to increase, trying to find the right clientele. I'd love to know, like, for you, what are maybe some things that right now come to mind with you when it comes to just money? Like, has your perception changed over the years? Like, let's go back to Chris Howe when he was the lifeguard
Chris
getting
Howe.
these gift cards that are just taking over his wallet to at a point where you're seeing 5-figure, 6-figure budgets and you're running shoots with brands that most people are familiar with. What does that look like? Because I feel like a lot of people in the industry are always trying to figure out, what do you charge for this? Do I charge for this? Usage and licensing. So let's talk about money for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I love chatting about this side of things because I think money is a conversation that a lot of people have difficulties around. Like people are always like, yeah, like, and they just use like a vague number, and things like that. But what I really appreciate on a side note is within the YouTube community, at least in Canada, is like everyone's been really transparent. Like we'll like text each other being like, what did you get paid on this last gig?
Nice.
And like a lot of people are pretty transparent, because all transparency does, if you are in a safe space to communicate that with like colleagues and friends, is it means that no one's getting taken advantage of, or you can keep the standard alive, or you can like start to convince the brand to be like, we need to pay more to the people and raise the bar. So one is like, if you're not having those conversations, be the person that starts by just being like, and I got paid this much, even if it feels scary, because maybe it's less or more. And that really starts to get a conversation going within your like group and network and friends like that. But there's so much gatekeeping. And I also recognize that I live in Canada, and maybe everyone here is just like a little bit more open to these conversations.
Yeah.
And I was chatting with someone and they're like, oh yeah, in America, everyone just gatekeeps everything. And I was like, okay, maybe, I don't know. I don't live there.
Honestly,
so it's hard to say.
It's kind of true.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was your personal relationship like with money outside of business? Like, I think a lot of people are influenced by even how their parents handle money.
Yeah.
And I got to say, like, when I talk to entrepreneurs and freelancers who struggle with talking about pricing, I'm like, bro, like, how's your personal budgeting? Like, how did your parents handle money? Can you speak on that for a second?
No, for sure. Absolutely. Like, my dad was an entrepreneur and both my grandparents were entrepreneurs. So my grandfather had a German travel company. He brought people like all around the world. So like, I saw someone who was like, I can make money traveling. And I experienced it too. Like I went on these trips where we'd be on a cruise and like basically like 1/4 of the cruise was sold out by him. And like the captain's coming down being like, this is amazing. He's getting like the suite in
sales guy.
Brazil.
That's
he literally,
dope.
I remember the whole thing, that this is just a fun story to tell. But my grandmother always says it with so much pride. She'd be like, oh yeah, your grandfather worked with, at the time, marketing would have been on radio. So he like bought out like a 747 jet and then played like Caribbean music in the kitchen in the background, being like, we're having the best time down here in like Turks and Caicos right now, and like there's only 2 spots left on the plane. And then like the phone calls would be coming in to book the entire 747, and she's like, yeah, he was just like faking it in the kitchen, pretending he's having the best time. But he knew how to sell.
Wow.
And for me, and then my other grandfather had a meat packing distribution company, and so he literally retired at like 40, and so he was like around a lot for my childhood. And we don't have to get into the nuances of what all that means. What that really established is that it was safe to be an entrepreneur, and I just had like a family that was going like, yeah, of course you can work for yourself. That's not a problem, because everyone did it basically. And so that gave me like permission to do it in a way that I think a lot of people don't get permission to do that kind of thing. And both on the good side, recognizing that money is just like, it's not a bad thing. Like money is just a thing that provides the opportunity to do like value exchange, and it doesn't make a person like better or worse. It's just a thing that is available to them. Whereas I know a lot of people like could have a really unhealthy relationship with money, and if you feel this way, maybe you don't even want to like chase money as like a goal. But what that did is it put a lot of pressure on me to kind of follow in their footsteps. So like here's 2 people and 3 people that were very successful. Now the pressure's on, like you're part of this, like the next legacy. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to make a lot of money, even if I didn't even know that no one was putting the pressure on me. No one's going like, oh yeah, you wanna be a how? You better make $1 million, right? It's like, no, it's no one said that. I just you just observe it as a child. It's part of like what happened.
That's
right?
good.
And so for me, I did have an unhealthy relationship though with how I attached my self-worth to money. And the interesting part is when I finally hit the goal of whatever I had set out for myself, I realized I wasn't any happier. And so a lot of the times, whatever I compromised on the creative, whatever compromised on maybe like the values as a person, like I think what I want to get into there without being too vague is literally like, let's say I had a budget of like $5,000 to make a video. I would have maybe like tried to convince somebody who was helping me and paid them less, so I made them more money to get to my goal of when I thought I was happier. When looking back, like the person that's here now goes like, no, pay the person what they're worth. It doesn't matter because everyone's winning. You don't need to get to this goal faster or convince. I'd rather just everyone win, and integrity and confidence and people feeling empowered is more of the priority, that we all do good work rather than maybe paying someone less to hit my insecurities faster, and then that person feeling like trash because they accepted a lower rate because I convinced them. So like I'll acknowledge like that happened in my life and I hate that, but that taught me to get to a place where I am now, where if I have the money, I go, how sick is it that I get to like hire my friends to work on projects like this?
That's so cool.
Right?
I love that.
And I'm not going to convince you to work at a lower rate. I'm just like, you tell me your rate, and if I think it aligns with our budget, yes. If not, we'll hire someone else that fits it, but you'll come on the next one when I have the money. And that's cool.
That's awesome. Follow-up question. We've been asking guests this on the MIDCONVO. What did your biggest budget look like, if you will? And you don't need to be too, like overly specific. And what did it teach you?
One of the stories is that we had a 6-figure budget for a commercial. The deliverables was basically just like a finalized commercial that was going just to social, still too. So it was a lot of money getting put into like what was like a final ad. But what was interesting is it felt like I was like, okay, now I have the chance to like bring in the teams that I've always wanted to, and bring in all the professionals that I always thought. And I'm looking around and we had like a 17-person crew, and there was like pride in that. Like I remember there was this interesting moment I was looking around and being like, this is really cool. Whatever we've built up now led to this moment. And then when we started getting into like the drafting periods and the back and forth with the client, turns out like that many cooks in the kitchen just kind of like killed the spirit of the creative. And everyone kind of walked away feeling a little like, and then that sucks, because now you have like, I went into it being like, here's jobs for 17 people and we're going to make it the greatest thing in the world. Maybe my expectations are just like way too high for the thing.
Absolutely.
And once it all finally got to the end, it's like, I don't even know if I made a profit on it as like the company owner. I just wanted to make sure everything ended up well. And I was like, I don't know if that's what I want again. And it's always difficult because you have to ask yourself the question, like, did I just not manage it well? And that's why it didn't go well? Or was it inherently not a good experience? But what I think birthed from the ashes of that fire for me was the thing that I'm working on now, which is trying to hire smaller teams in the essence of protecting the creative versus overcooking the creative, like we were chatting about before. And that's really just for me being like, no, that aligns with me, because I don't need to have the ego be satiated by doing this big production that makes me feel important. I actually just come back down to what is the best thing for the brand, what is the best thing for the people working on this project, and what will be the best thing that we can make with a smaller team. Because I'd rather pay somebody more money that can do the 2 or 3 jobs and we get to travel to a sick location than trying to recreate the sick location in a studio, but have like 17 people that made it look like a forest rather than just being in the forest. You know what I mean?
Wow. I think
That's
there's
so
longevity in that mindset. Like for anyone listening, I think we often see big numbers on social media and we're like, dang.
Yeah, or just in general, like even me, I think you said it's like an ego thing. Like especially when let's say you're a filmmaker or aspiring filmmaker, like your whole ego thing is like, I want to get good enough so that I can have a big camera rig and be on a big set with a bunch of people and a bunch of models and talent and crew. Or if you're a photographer, maybe it's like owning a studio, or like maybe it's doing something that you feel like a successful creative in that industry is doing.
Yeah.
But really, it does come down to an ego thing. Because I feel the same way. When there's more cooks in the kitchen, whenever I'm hanging out with my friends and we're shooting content, there's nothing quite like getting a shot that you're just wasn't expecting, and you look over their shoulder like, wow, that's a banger. That's fire.
That's
but when
good.
you're working on a crew, you get the shot that everyone planned for. It's like the one shot that everyone planned for like a month, and you get it, and it looks so mid.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, we just planned like a whole month with like 10 people for this one frame, and it could have got it done with like a gimbal and an FX3 and it would have looked way better.
Yeah. And I think that's just a reminder that you can't argue with results. I think that's such a big thing, is that we try to convince everybody that we need all this stuff to get results. But the reality is, like, if I got that with that setup, what difference does it make? So then that comes into the education process that we were talking about before, is like, you don't need all of that to get the final image, because we have gear as well as knowledge available to us now that allows us to get there with smaller things, even like an iPhone.
Wow. It makes the barrier to entry a little bit easier for anyone who's trying to get to that point.
Yeah. And I'd also say that the idea is like the winner so much of the time. So like, if you are a videographer, but you're not exercising creative, that's cool, because you can just be the technical person that is getting hired because you know how to be like, I'm a good visual storyteller. But I think what will really like level you up in the next part of your career is if you start to pitch ideas or contribute to the idea where it adds value to it, in the sense that it makes it either like more valuable for a marketing perspective, it catches the hook at the beginning. Because what if like as a videographer, you were like, the best way to start this piece is to shoot it on an iPhone. That strategy is more valuable to a brand than for you to be like, no, we got to shoot the opening on a Red. And then the person on the opposite side looking at the clip goes, ugh, this is too professional and swipes through it.
Too big,
Because what if like your expertise as a visual storyteller was that you should actually shoot on a VHS cam for the intro shot?
For sure. Honestly, I relate to so much of the stuff that's being like explained in this podcast episode.
Yeah, this is going to turn into a workshop at some point.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like this was a workshop.
MIDCONVO, Chris Howe
low-key.
workshop. We'll bring it somewhere.
That'd be sick. And on a side note too, like education is just such like a deep passion of mine now on every level. And so I measure the success of any project now as long as we all learned or I got the opportunity to teach. Like that's like my only reason to wake up every day.
Man,
That's
I want to
sick.
shout you out as someone who's, really been able to pave the way for a lot of filmmakers and creatives, that at the core, you're like, I want to uplift other creatives. I want to uplift other people. I
Yeah.
want to bring the people up next, like aside me.
Dude, sending the elevator down is one of the greatest feelings in the world.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
Honestly, I think we could talk about this topic like all day long, but hopefully who are listening, you got something away, like you educated yourself with this episode. Definitely listen back to it on some parts. I personally took away the most during like the educating your client part. That's so good. Not a lot of freelancers educate the client, and they just kind of throw a pitch out there and pray that it's going to like happen. And then they either say, oh, the budget, it didn't work, or the budget was too high. And they're like, boo. And then they walk away. But educating your client is so, so important. So I took that away from it.
I think there's a lot of like spray and pray mentality.
Yep.
When you have the opportunity to really be like, if I just spend a little bit more time and I just target in, you can almost take like a sniper approach to the exact thing that you want out of life. And I mean, this is like on any level, by the way. This can be in like your personal life or in work. But if you're like, I want to work with this client, figure out that goal and work backwards, rather than being like, maybe if I just do all this stuff, eventually I'll find my way to that client. It's like, set that as the target and then imagine what are the steps in between to get there. And then just be the creative you want to be. Like, you can go after it. It's really like, your choice to just decide on how you strategize to get there.
It's like kind of it's like if you want to show up differently, just be that person, you know,
Yeah.
or dress that way, talk that way, kind of be about it. And that's kind of how it comes into existence. I truly feel like that too. It's not really about faking it either. It's about like actually truly believing that you could be the person that you aspire to be.
Yeah, and I love how we started with like self-discovery, because some of us need to hear this, that you need to put your blinders on. Social's great. Having a strong community is great. But at the end of the day, it's like what makes you the most passionate, and also what's going to help you do something that you want to do in the long run. That's not just temporary. And I think your story it really embodies that picture for a lot of freelancers. But to kind of wrap this up, where can people find Chris Howe on the internet, on the interweb?
I mean, if you search Chris Howe on the interwebs, you'll find all the socials. But what I would say is like through this conversation, you know, we're really building out our teams. And so if there is anybody that's like listening right now that you think you fit into a multidisciplinary person that's like good in 2 or 3 areas, like genuinely send me an email. I would love to see your work. I want to connect with those types of people in the world because there's so many opportunities that are getting presented. And I would love to like hopefully find a way to like give you that work, because you don't have to just live in Canada. You can be anywhere in the world. We have clients in every single kind of like country as well as like territory. But, you know, please find me. Like it's important like for either connecting IRL, like we do a lot of meetups, as well as the chance to go to any of the events that we put on. So, you know, shoot me a DM, shoot me an email. I'll do my best to get back to you because I like care about the people that are listening right now.
That's awesome.
That's sweet. Dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and excited to push this one out.
Yes, we appreciate you.
Yeah, likewise, guys. Thanks.
Peace.
Peace.